Hello and welcome to Herald Talks, the Diplomats Edition. I'm Amy Booth, Managing Editor of the Buenos Aires Herald, and I'm here with our editor, Juan Décima.
Good afternoon, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here for our first edition of Herald Talks with our distinguished guests for this afternoon.
We recently celebrated our 148th anniversary. The Buenos Aires Herald was founded in 1876, existed for 141 years as a newspaper, and was relaunched in 2023 after a short break. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be back, offering the best quality in journalism about Argentina and Latin America. We're here in the Hilton Buenos Aires, launching a series of talks, speaking to experts about their perspectives on Argentina and its position in the world stage. Enormous privilege to launch this series with Ambassador Marc Stanley of the United States. Welcome, Ambassador Stanley.
Thank you, and happy birthday. We remember when you were born. We're now in our 202nd year, and you're just a youngster, but we remember when you were born, so happy anniversary.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Stanley.
So, Ambassador Stanley, from what I could recollect, you've been here since 2021. That's 3 years now?
Yeah, right after that. I got here January 20th of 2022.
Okay, so a little over 2 years now.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. I was wondering, how much of Argentina have you managed to visit and travel? What are some of your maybe favorite destinations around the country?
So I did look at the certificate that Joe Biden gave me, and I looked carefully, and it did not say I was the ambassador of Buenos Aires. It said I was the ambassador to Argentina. And there are 23 provinces plus the provincial city. And so on Friday, I will complete 23 provinces, and I'm very excited about that. So now I've been to everywhere but San Luis. I'll be finished on Friday. And picking a favorite is like choosing between Boca and River. I'm not that stupid. I found something I've loved in every province. And I really have. I'm not BSing. I have really loved every province. And this country is 3.5 times the size of Texas, the 8th largest landmass. And there's something beautiful about every single province. And so it's a great country. I've also been, by the way, to the 24th province of Argentina in Miami.
Yeah, some people call it that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I wanted to ask a little bit, since you've been able to travel, I'm sure you've been able to appreciate the number of industries and the number of sectors that Argentina has. Chief among those are the agricultural sector and increasingly the mining sector, especially lithium, which is critical for the energy transition. I wanted to ask if you see scope for Argentina and the US to grow together in those sectors.
Yeah. The realization that has hit me is how similar our two countries are. We both have what the world needs and wants. We both have oil and gas. We both have rare earth minerals. We both have agriculture and livestock. We both have technology. We both have human capital. And we are the perfect partners to come together to feed and fuel the world. Right now, Argentina is about to release what's in the Vaca Muerta. Argentina, second largest shale oil and gas in the world. Argentina has the third largest lithium deposits ready to come out and be a major player. Argentina has really important copper deposits, and that's what I think is going to eclipse lithium for a short term because lithium prices are down. Mm-hmm. Copper is about to come out with the RIGI. You're seeing the investments in San Juan. Of course, agriculture and livestock are doing great. Technology is doing great. And I see the US and Argentina as perfect partners to feed and fuel the world. The world needs what our two countries have, and we're great partners for this. We're still the #1 investor in Argentina, and we have been for a long, long, long time, and will remain that way.
Fantastic. And speaking of food in Argentina, do you have a favorite? Because of course, meat, Malbec, medialunas. I
do. I've fallen in love with entraña. I get that in a lot of places. Certainly the empanadas. I like the cebolla y queso empanadas. The medialunas I love. Alfajores, the new one that comes from Mar del Plata, I really like. The Rapa Nui chocolates I wish I never found. And the Rapa Nui ice cream I wish I never found. the various gins I've tried around the country and beers, the wines, the cherries that are about to come back out, the blueberries which we're importing now in the U.S., the cherries, your apples and pears are amazing. I love it, just everything. I wish you had more fresh seafood here, and maybe a little more spice.
Things to take on the to-do list, I guess.
Yeah,
basically.
add it to the list. Yeah.
So you mentioned the growing cooperation and possibilities between the two countries. A new government just took office in Argentina in December of last year, and over the course of this year, we've seen a number of U.S. government officials, from the commander of the United States Southern Command, General Richardson, to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, I think he's the first Secretary of State since Rex Tillerson to come. Is there a reason for this increased amount of U.S. government officials in Argentina over this time?
Yeah, we had our ears open. Exactly what you just said. President Milei indicated that he wanted a strong alignment with the United States. We heard what he said and we responded. I just made a list before I walked in. I don't think we've ever worked so hard in 1 year putting together the visitors we've had. We've had State, Department of Energy, Treasury, trade representatives, agriculture, NASA, Department of Defense, Southcom, White House, Senate, House of Representatives, CDC, Transportation, Justice, Homeland Security, DEA, CIA, Corps of Engineers, and more. And we have worked our embassy to death, and we've worked the Argentines to death. I didn't mention Department of Education. We have worked everybody to death with all of these visits. Not to mention, we brought Argentines up to the United States time after time, putting those visits together, and U.S. companies coming here and Argentine companies going to the United States. I just led a mission last week to California. We had another mission in January. I brought Foreign Minister Mondino there in May. We've been busy. I've never been so busy in my life putting these kinds of meetings together. But yes, we heard the message and we're trying to put it together to exploit the opportunity to say, we hear you and we want to make it work.
And what are you hearing from the United States, business people or government officials that are coming into contact with the new government?
So they said they're listening. Number one, we're already the largest investor, okay? Mm-hmm. So they're already here. Some companies have been here more than 100 years. Number two, they're waiting for the RIGI to pass. That's only in specified industries and specified amounts, so they're getting there. They're waiting for the FX markets to get fixed, and for the other measures that President Milei and the Congress are still working on. Once the economy is stabilized and there's access to capital and there's the achievement of what Minister Mondino calls a normal economy, I think you're going to see a larger influx of business. And I think President Milei and others have made great inroads into the technology. They're looking about coming. You're talking about data storage facilities. They're talking about in Rio Negro, et cetera. You're seeing more and more back offices getting established here in Argentina. There's great interest, but it takes two to tango. Argentina has to create if you're going to build a house, you have to build the right foundation first. And Argentina's, the Milei administration and Congress are fixing the foundation for the house, and then the builders can come in and do it. You know, you got to build the roads, you got to do everything else to get that done.
So to finish the closing question, I think you mentioned
we're done already?
Wow.
We can have 1 more minutes.
Okay,
That's
so
fast.
I'm just wondering about taking up on that point you just mentioned. Under Secretary Lago, who was here in April,
Yeah.
one of the things she pointed out that the United States was bullish on trade and cooperation with the United States. With Argentina. I was wondering if you had to name 3 sectors that you can see growing expansion and more cooperation between the two going forward, what would you point to?
I would. First of all, obviously the rare earth minerals is the biggest. Second is the infrastructure to ramp up the rare earth minerals and the Vaca Muerta and the technology and the agriculture and everything else. Artificial intelligence is going to change all of our lives. You have a phone in your hand, right? What did you do before that phone 20 years ago? Where did you get that information? You didn't have it. Our lives totally changed 20 years ago, that you couldn't imagine how that worked. I can't tell you what our lives are going to be like in 5 years after quantum technology and artificial intelligence are going to totally change our lives. And so that's going to be a major investment in Argentina, a major trade between our countries, in agriculture, in livestock, in seeds, in infrastructure, in transportation, in the drilling equipment, in doing fracking, and doing plant growth and everything like that. Education too, by the way. Science, I didn't even mention health. Pharmaceuticals, huge opportunities here in Argentina.
Okay, so just a couple of points that I'd like to follow up on that. You mentioned, well, first of all, you mentioned exchange, currency, and the ease of doing business here. Do you think that that's part of building the foundations of the house that you were discussing?
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges over the last few years has been access to capital.
And the controls, right? And
the controls, the ability, supply chain, predictability, rule of law, independent judiciary, a normal economy. We're not looking for an advantage, we're just looking for normalcy. U.S. companies can go anywhere to do business. They can go to Uruguay, they can go to Chile, they can go to Europe, they can go to Brazil. Why do they want to go to Argentina if there's risk? And they want to eliminate risk and have a normal economy where they can access their imports and exports and access their capital. And that's all they're asking for. It's just fairness and normal.
Fundamental then, the issue of the capital controls, as we know. And you also mentioned science in Argentina. How do you see that sector growing, developing, changing, especially under the new government?
You know, I've been to CONAI and CONICET and INVAP, and I think you have some of the best scientists in Latin America. I hope it continues to be nurtured. You have some of the best, going back to Sarmiento, one of the best education systems in Latin America. I'm worried about it. I'm worried that poverty, over 55-60% of kids under 15 are living in poverty. A lot of them aren't finishing school. As artificial intelligence and other changes are going to hit us, are our children going to be ready for this change? Our workforce is going to be ready. In the United States and Argentina, we need to focus on education and make sure we're ready. But Argentina right now has an incredible human workforce, technology, great human capital. But we need to, both countries, nurture our human capital. It's important for both of our countries.
Just to finish on a lighter issue, you mentioned Boca River. I understand you know how hot that passion runs. You come from a state of Texas, very known for its large sports fandom. I wonder how have you come to interact with Argentine fandom, which of course is mostly concentrated on football, which in the U.S. is called soccer. How has that been, if you've been able to experience that?
So I've been really lucky. I played the Messi bandwagon during the World Cup. I bet other U.S. ambassadors on teams that Argentina was playing. I would bet on Argentina. So I won all the time, except that Saudi Arabia game, which was terrible. But I won every other game. And so I've had a lot of fun betting on Argentina. And so I'm looking forward to the next World Cup, which we're hosting in the United States. I'm looking forward to the Olympics, and I've learned a lot betting on Argentina. Great time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. I think betting on Argentina in sports and in everything else is always a good idea.
And I'm optimistic. I think this is a rough time right now, but I'm optimistic. Argentina has the resources that the world wants. The United States has the resources the world wants. I think we're the most natural partners to walk arm in arm and solve the world's problems. And we didn't even talk about tourism. I think you're going to see a lot more Americans coming to school here, being tourists here. But we want more Argentines to come to the United States and visit our country too. And
Thanks so much.
congratulations on your anniversary. I'm glad the Herald's back, and I read it. I'm excited for your publication. So thank you so much for re-entering the market and educating all of us.
Ambassador Marc Stanley, thank you so much for joining us for our inaugural Herald Talks, the Diplomats Edition. It's been wonderful speaking to you today.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're watching us perhaps afterwards, do stay tuned, because we have another great interview coming up with Ambassador Kirsty Hayes right here at Herald Talks, the Diplomats Edition in the Herald Buenos Aires. In the Hilton Buenos Aires, excuse me. We're in the presidential suite, gorgeous views out over Puerto Madero, the Reserva Ecológica, wonderful.
Make sure you see her tango.
Will do.
Okay.
Beautiful
Excellent.
day.
Beautiful. Okay, stay tuned. Do share your thoughts. Tweet #Diplomats Edition. We'll be right back with you in just a few minutes. Thank you so much, Ambassador Stanley.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Herald Talks, the Diplomats Edition. I'm Amy Booth, Managing Editor of the Buenos Aires Herald, and we heard earlier today from Ambassador Marc Stanley of the US. Had some very interesting things to say about Argentine relationships with the US, the situation with the Argentine economy, critical minerals, and of course travel in the United States. Pleasure to hear from him earlier. We're now joined by Ambassador Kirsty Hayes, the ambassador of the UK to Argentina, which is of course a really, really fantastic opportunity to speak to you. The Buenos Aires Herald is it's a publication with roots in the British community in Argentina, so you know this is extremely special to us. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Hayes.
It's a huge pleasure to be here. Hard act to follow Marc, though.
So to get the ball rolling, I wanted to ask, I understand that you were a paleontologist in a previous life.
Almost. I was an
Almost.
archaeologist.
You were an archaeologist.
So I studied Latin American archaeology at university, and I did some archaeological field work in Peru and also in Belize in Central America. And I actually joined the Foreign Office wanting to work in Latin America. This was about 25 years ago, but this is the first time I've managed to get a posting in the region. So very special for me.
That's incredible. And I wanted to ask, since Argentina has done some incredible paleontology and archaeology work, do you have a favorite or a most interesting site in Argentina?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed visiting Xincal in Catamarca, which also is very close to Londres, Catamarca, which was
Londres,
great.
Catamarca.
Londres, Catamarca. So it was great to visit there with the governor. I think the last time that a British ambassador had visited Londres, the Argentine Londres, was in the 1970s. So it was great to re-establish that link. But yeah, Xincal, I think possibly less known as one of the great Inca capitals. People are internationally probably more familiar with the sites in Peru, but it was wonderful to go there. It's been it's very well presented as well for tourists, so I recommend it if you haven't been. But the paleontology is obviously fantastic as well. I've been in Chubut over the weekend, obviously a real hotspot for paleontology. And I also, I'm not going to say it right, I was in San Juan and I went to the Valley of the Moon, or Igualasco, is that right?
Igualasco, yeah.
Yes, which was amazing too.
So, Ambassador, to talk about a little bit about the current economic and energy scene, Argentina is known for its natural resources, which it has plenty of, including minerals that are critical for the energy transition, which is on the agenda of every government in the world, including lithium among those critical minerals. There are many British mining companies, of course. Is it a sector where we can hope to see or expect to see growing cooperation between the countries?
Absolutely. I mean, you're so right that critical minerals are going to be fundamental for the world's green transition, and Argentina is extremely well placed in that. Lithium has been a big focus. I think copper is also very relevant. I think copper has a lot of underexploited resources here in Argentina when you compare with Chile. We already have a lot of interest from British companies. We obviously have Rio Tinto with their significant presence in Salta province. And I think it's really important that we look not just at the opportunities that lithium brings economically for Argentina, but we also think about social license. So the companies we work with are all really clear that the bad old days of very water intensive and visually damaging, the sort of impact visually of the old fashioned open salars is something we should move beyond. And Rio Tinto, for example, are working with very new technology which uses minimal water. And I think that's very important. Also very important that these projects bring jobs and growth to the local economies and provide local sources of employment. So that's something we've been putting a lot of emphasis on. But so far our companies have been really delighted with the welcome they've received in Argentina, both at national level and at provincial level. And in fact, we have 5 governors shortly visiting to the UK along with the Secretary of Mining for London Metals Week. So it's definitely an area we want to grow on.
So you mentioned this cooperation between British companies and Argentine provinces. Argentina brought a new government, has a new government in office since December. What are you hearing about from businesses and from the government side of what they are expecting, and how are they feeling up to now from this new administration?
Yeah, it's a big question. Obviously, President Milei has come in with a very radical reform plan, both for bringing Argentina's economy back on track, but also for promoting private investment and making this a more business-friendly environment. We already had a lot of British investment and interest, over 100 British subsidiaries, for example, in the country. But I think British companies are watching with a lot of interest the economic programme so far. I think there's been some really encouraging macroeconomic figures, and we're seeing Argentina's persistent problem of very high inflation beginning to level off. And so we've had a lot of calls from potential UK investors who are very interested. That said, I think people are taking a little bit of a wait and see approach and seeing how long this economic change will take to bed in.
I think that's a really interesting point, because we've seen some really interesting initiatives in terms of business. Like we've seen the new large investment regime, the RIGI, and I think there's a lot of conversation going on at the moment with international companies who are maybe looking at dipping a toe in the water, and they're asking, first of all, is this enough? They're watching the provinces adhere to it or not, and also they're talking about whether currency controls are still a deal breaker in the context of the RIGI. I wanted to ask a little bit about what you think about that for British companies.
Yeah, I think the issue of currency controls is really a critical one. You mentioned dipping a toe in Argentina, and I think one of the challenges has been it's not an easy market in which to dip a toe, exactly because of the currency controls, and also because there has been a bit of a history of reversals of economic policies or commercial policies, which make it a little hard for businesses to plan. So in fact, the companies the British companies who've had most success here are not really the ones who've dipped in a toe. They're the ones that have dived in wholeheartedly, and they're in it for the long term and able to weather sort of ups and downs economically or policy wise. But I think if and when the government feels in a position to lift those currency controls, and it's something that has to be done in a very mindful way and not hurried, but when that happens, I think that will be incredibly significant, not just for British investors, but for investment more broadly.
So the British Embassy is very active in the shall we say, relations, cultural relations and diplomatic relations between communities. Of course, the British community has long-standing in Argentina. Herald is part of that. But I was wondering, what is the current state of Anglo-Argentine cultural relations, considering that the Anglo community in Argentina is mostly made up of sons and grandchildren and children of the original British immigrants. I was wondering how those relations stand today.
I think they're still really strong. As a Scot, I sometimes, I do use Anglo-Argentine, but of course it's not just the English community, it's
Right.
also the Scottish community and indeed the Welsh community. I said I was down in Chubut over the weekend, and it is extraordinary to see the Welsh cultural influences, both in places like Trelew and Gaiman, but also further west in Trevelyan, where Welsh is widely spoken. I had sort of several Welsh teas that were very much as if I was really in Wales. I went to an Eisteddfod, which is a Welsh poetry festival. So it's really, really thriving. Equally, we have a lot of, as you say, mostly descendants of British immigrants, but who keep those cultures really alive. I'm always staggered by the number of bagpipe players there are in Argentina, for example. And there's excellent work in terms of preserving the story of the British culture. Just to give one example, the excellent work done by the British Cemetery. And I ought to mention that next year we'll actually be celebrating the bicentenary of our relationship. So it'll be a great opportunity to shine a light on, the role that the British community has played in Argentina, and obviously, as you say, the Herald very much a part of that.
Thank you, that's so interesting. And I think that brings me nicely on to the next question, which is that obviously in the UK we've just had a change of government, and our Foreign Secretary is now David Lamy. Now he's the son of Guyanese immigrants, so I wanted to ask whether you think that, having a Foreign Secretary who's the son of South Americans could lead to a greater focus from the part of the UK government on Anglo or British Argentine relations.
Yeah, I think obviously the Foreign Secretary brings a really rich cultural heritage to the role, and he has shown himself in his early weeks. I mean, he's shown himself interested in a lot of things. You've probably seen he's travelled very extensively, but he has shown a lot of interest in Latin America, and I know he has made, even before the election, he had made several visits out to the region. So yes, we're really optimistic about the position this government's going to take towards the region.
And could you go into any more detail on what sorts of sectors and issues that might take the form of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think trade is going to be front and centre of a lot of our work going forward. Trade and economic growth more broadly. The UK has always wanted a strong and stable Argentina, and we're great believers in the potential that the country has. We've already mentioned critical minerals, but also, it's an extraordinary agricultural producer. Maybe we can't go back to Argentina's golden age where we had this phenomenally vibrant trade relationship, but we can try and make some moves in that direction. So even in the challenging last few years, Argentine wine exports, Malbec in particular, have rocketed in the UK, and you can't go into any restaurant in the UK now without seeing at least one Malbec on the restaurant menu, and often a choice. So there's plenty of potential to increase that trade. I think we've mentioned the cultural links and educational links. So we have a program of scholarships, and we're looking to expand that program with Argentina to celebrate these special people-to-people links that we have. So it's going to be multifaceted, I think.
Yeah, I think we were interested to know more. So I understand that you're referring to the Ching Scholarships there, because we've had some very important Argentine political figures such as
Absolutely.
Martín Lustó, Jorge Capitanich, as well as a number of presidents around the world who participated in that program. So I mean, it's great to hear that that's something that you're looking to develop. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of the things that's been very heartwarming as British ambassador here, that as I travel around the country or go to various meetings, I'm always meeting Chevening alumni, not just in politics and from, every political party, every part of the political spectrum, but people in business, in civil society, in journalism, in science. So it's a very important programme for us. And when our former Foreign Minister David Cameron met with the Canciller Diana Mondino earlier in the year, she mentioned the importance of the Chevening Scholarships, and as a result of that we've increased the number against a backdrop where globally we're reducing the number of scholarships that we offer.
So we talked about earlier about minerals, essential minerals, and the cooperation between the 5 provinces and the British mining sector. Is there any concern regarding the current government's anti-2030 agenda that is very big on environmental change, and kind of the reluctance of the government to, or its message that has been against that kind of those kind of topics?
So the first thing I would say is that this, the 2030 agenda, and particularly environmental protection and the fight against climate change, is a top priority for our government. So if you haven't seen it, I would really recommend taking a look at the Foreign Secretary's keynote speech yesterday on climate change, where he set out very clearly what the scale of the challenge as we see it, and the very bold programme of action that the UK is taking, both domestically but also in terms of how we support less developed countries to address these challenges. I think the President has made clear that for him this is not a priority, and that on a personal level I think he has some doubts about the causes of climate change. But I think it's really important with all this sort of news whir around this issue, that the government has committed to fulfilling the obligations accepted by the previous government in terms of its programme to reduce national emissions, and it's not just the critical minerals that Argentina has to offer here. The country has boundless potential for green energy production. So wind energy, obviously. At the moment the UK is the world leader in offshore wind production, but I have to say, if Argentina put its mind to it, I'm sure it could beat us very quickly, because you have a lot of wind in parts of the country, and there's also other provinces that have a lot of potential for solar production. So I think there's a really important and significant role that Argentina could play on this agenda.
Thank you so much. Did you have any other questions, Juan?
I was just curious of hearing a little bit more about those 5 provinces, because I understand that's something that hasn't been released yet. I had never heard about it, and I was just interested in hearing if you could offer any more details about that cooperation.
Yeah, sure. So this week in London at the end of the month, it's the sort of probably the most globally important convocation of people with an interest in metals and mining, and we are expecting the governors of, I better get this right, Salta, Jujuy, Catamarca, San Juan and Mendoza, I hope that's correct, I think it is, as well as the Secretary of Mining, and a broader delegation as well. And the idea is exactly to explore how Argentina can make the most of these fantastic natural resources that it has. As far as we're aware, it's the largest grouping of governors to visit the UK, so we're quite excited about it.
That's fantastic. Well, we're excited to hear more about that and more details about that as and when it emerges. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ambassador Hayes. It's been fantastic speaking to you. You know, the Buenos Aires Herald is a newspaper that was founded by British immigrants. It has roots in the British community in Argentina. So it's been really fantastic and really special being able to speak to you today. So thank you.
It's been a real pleasure, and I hope you'll play an active part in our bicentenary celebrations next year.
I hope so too. Yes.
I'd be honored.
Great.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
This has been Herald Talks, the Diplomats Edition, here in the Hilton Buenos Aires. I'm Amy Booth, Managing Editor of the Herald, and this has been Juan, Décima, Editor of the Buenos Aires Herald also. I'd like to thank the whole team of the Buenos Aires Herald who've been here supporting this event, especially our Editor-in-Chief, Estefania Pozo, who's been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event happen. I'd also really like to thank Ámbito Debate and Ricardo Daloya, who's also done an enormous amount to produce this event. Thanks, of course, to the Hilton, and most of all, thank you to our audience who's watching us, whether you're watching us live or whether you're tuning in later. If you found this interesting, don't hesitate to tweet your thoughts on #Diplomats Edition. I hope this is going to be the first of many events. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you.